So I'm going to do a little something different. Is that I was turned on to this essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now I've read a couple of things from Emerson, mostly quotes from the Civil War era, because I've read a lot around Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant and that sort of stuff. Sidebar: Ulysses is not his first name, and the S stands for nothing. But hit me up in the comments if you want to find that out, or do a search for yourself. But what I want to do is explain and potentially turn this into a series. We'll see, right? You never fully know, and I trust my intuition. But what really stood out to me with this was it is one of those books that just, or one of those essays, I should say, that just like gives voice to your internal thoughts inside your head. And so this one is called Self Reliance. And I am coming to this late, right? Somebody turned me on to it and literally said, the way you speak, Colby, you need to read this. And I was like, yeah, no, Emerson, from like quotes and stuff I've read of his, like everything that comes out of his mouth is banging. I'm just like, what a freaking impressive mind. And then I read this morning. And so instead of having perfect plans or whatever, what I want to do, and this is just my intuition speaking to me, is find a sentence, a passage in here, read it, and I will put the words up on screen to give full credit to the man, and then just give my take on it, because I am talking about what is in here, and this is clearly a timeless thing. It is one of those that you're like, this will still be useful 500 years from now. You know, I'm the other book I'm reading right now is Plutarch. He references Plutarch in here, and I started reading Plutarch because I read, like I said, Lincoln. I read about Harry Truman and all these sorts of things, and they reference Plutarch a ton, and it has that same staying power. You can just tell from reading it. I'm like, this will still be just as reliable 2,000 years from now, just like Plutarch's is. And if you don't know who all these people are, then just look them up, read them. They're freaking great. Uh, and so, what I want to do, because I read this for the first time this morning, it's about, and I got this from the library. It is, it's basically 20 pages. And in that 20 pages, I was like, that's a banger sentence, and that's a banger sentence, and that's a banger sentence. And so I just want to grab one. And once I find one, I will read it out. And then I'm going to give you my take on it. And who knows how long this video is going to be, but I will tell you almost everything in here. I was like, yep, I have full conviction with that. It's really hard for me to disagree with some of that. And I have my own opinions on it, hugely so. So let me skim it, because I kind of have one in mind. See if I can find it, because it was only one sentence and it was like in the middle. All right, so found the one. It's so good. I'm gonna read the whole thing, like the section to give context, and then I think I will just really focus on one portion of it. But it says, "Let a Stoic open the resources of man and tell men they are not leaning willows, but can and must detach themselves, that with the exercise of self-trust new powers shall appear, that a man is the Word made flesh, born to shed healing to the nations, that he should be ashamed of our compassion, and that the moment he acts from himself, tossing the laws, the books, idolatries, and customs out of the window, we pity him no more, but thank and revere him. And that teacher shall restore the life of a man to splendor and make his name dear to all history." And what really stuck out with me is this portion, because I talk about this a lot, is that with the exercise of self trust, new powers shall appear. And that's what I want to digest and kind of speak on, because I am of the belief that the world is suffering from an absolute trust epidemic, right? And so let's kind of go to the source of it is because what we consume is run by marketing minds and sales and ultimately the dollar. It is the word trust has been so misused in terms of how to acquire it, how to retain it. And we'll talk about the self in just a second, but I say that because it's of this mindset that if the root is rotten, the tree can still grow and it can still look impressive. But the whole point of putting in the work and taking a bunch of risk, if you're a business owner, that's who I primarily work with, is to taste the fruit from that tree, right? That's literally why they call it the fruit of your labors. If you are going to labor, it is completely within your right to want to taste that fruit. But if the root is rotten, that fruit is going to taste off. It is going to taste metallic. It is going to taste, it's going to, it's going to foster this feeling of resentment potentially because you worked so hard only to realize that it wasn't what you wanted. And that is kind of how I perceive trust is that people have spent so much time trying to salesify and marketize, and I'm just making up words here, but like to do these things around the word trust that it is so diluted and it is overly complex that people do not understand what it means anymore. And so I operate on this mindset of what's called first principles thinking is when you have this massive thing, or it doesn't even have to be massive, it just feels like you can't see the whole picture, or you feel like there's multiple steps involved to get to this destination or this result, or simply to take the next logical step towards discovery, which is how I like to operate. Instead of needing the whole plan, I just like to think, what is the next logical step that aligns with me? And that very much relies on self-trust. But first principles thinking is taking whatever that thing is, that big thing or the unseen thing or the complex thing, and reducing it down to the smallest possible truth. And what I like to say is the smallest actionable truth, because a person is only as good as what they can execute upon, right? Even in the day of I would still say that ideas are mostly worthless, um, because ideas without fruition are just figments of our imagination, right? They don't hold any weight until they become something. And so what is the smallest actionable truth here? In my mind, it is to explain that trust is a within, not a without, right? So you may be running a business right now and maybe you're losing clients more often than you like, or maybe it's really hard to get clients to begin with. Or maybe you don't fully believe in the product you're selling or the service you're selling, but obviously you have family and bills and a lifestyle to keep and all that sort of stuff. And all of that is perfectly sensible. What makes it to where that fruit, like if you succeed in it, because, business is hard. Um, Creating something from nothing is hard. But to avoid it, first of all, like if it fails, whatever, but if it works, to avoid it tasting off, that fruit tasting metallic in your mouth, you need self-trust more than actual like external trust, right? Your clients need to trust you, your employees need to trust you. You need to be ethical and all these sorts of things to actually survive in this world and improve in this world. But that starts with you. And when it says that with the exercise of self trust, new powers shall appear, That's basically what my life's work is becoming. It is the only promise I have in my offer, because what I do is I hold space one-on-one for highly ambitious entrepreneurs, people who typically are approaching seven figures or surpass seven figures. The dollar figure doesn't really matter. What matters is that they are ready for the next level and they don't trust themselves, right? The amount of people just in the last, I was even on vacation. And so I had a partial week and I still ended up talking to 3 total strangers, not even clients, about them saying, I don't know what my next move is. And if we go backwards, what I could quickly determine with just a few questions was that they didn't know themselves, they didn't trust themselves, and that all the evidence they had created up to this point was from external aspects. And so even when they got success, it was really hard for them to explain how or why it didn't feel as good as it could have. And they certainly couldn't explain their internal feeling of, well, I feel I need to go to the next level. They couldn't even bring voice to that, right? Because their power, and that's where I love the sentence, new powers will become available. But really I see it as your innate power. When you don't have self-trust, that power is diminished. When Emerson says new powers, I agree with that, but I think before, especially with the people I talk to, it is a rediscovery of existing power first. In that, when you try and do everything right, when you are really good at plugging a hole, right? I feel lonely, so I'll join a networking group, or I feel like our business isn't growing enough, so I'll invest more in marketing, or I feel like, um, my spouse and I's relationship isn't going that well, so we'll invest in couples therapy, whatever it may be. Like, you're so good at filling the hole, but if you look at those backwards, it's just like, okay, well, the therapy's external, the marketing's external, right? It is there there is a missing piece, right? Because we're not after what's going to work regardless of what's attached to it. We're after, if it works, I will fully love and appreciate and align with what attaches to it, right? Emerson rails in Self-Reliance about the self-reliant person, the person who trusts themselves, stays at home. And he even goes for several paragraphs talking about traveling and how, and I don't fully agree with it, on the surface, but I think I understand the depth of it, is he's saying like those who travel for excitement and those who travel to learn more about themselves are basically super prone and susceptible to just adopting distraction, essentially, like adopting not knowing who you are and adding on top of it, right? It's like it's like the person who gets into a relationship and immediately starts just adopting the mannerisms, the interests, the hobbies, likes, whatever of the person they start dating. And that's kind of how he speaks about traveling, is just, no, when you travel, he's like, there's nothing wrong with traveling. But the person who has full self-reliance and full self-trust, they take their country with them, as in like they take their own ideology, they take their own self-belief, they take their own faith and trust, what I would call conviction, right? I call conviction the combination of belief, faith, and trust. They take that with them. They know who they are. One of my favorite quotes ever is, the most common form of despair is not knowing who you are. And one of the easiest ways to not know who you are, like, these things are synonymous, is by not trusting yourself. And so when I have conversations with people who are saying, I don't know what my next move is, that is not, let's find the move that's going to work. Everything works, right? When I talk to someone who's really struggling right now, I talked to a business owner the other day who was thinking about pivoting the model to more suit his lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. And we don't need to go into details about what I told him. I was like, problems over business model first. Like the business model will form to a problem that lights you up. What this business owner was struggling with was way more simple than what business model do I want, even what service and product am I trying to pivot to? Like there's a deeper feeling there of why doesn't this feel right? And what he was doing was just looking externally again, right? Well, I want this model, I want this thing, I want whatever. And it's just like that only steps over the problem. It avoids the problem. It doesn't actually equip you with the most powerful thing available to you, which is your conviction. I say the number one resource any business owner, especially I would say any person, but I help business owners to trust themselves the most. That is my promise in the offer, is that when you're done working with me, and people work with me for quite a while and they experience this before, they like continuing to progress, and they know that this thing has levels, right? Is the promise, just so I can get to the point, is that you will trust yourself more than anything else. Not anyone else, anything else, right? That is the promise. And how quickly people get to this level, maybe not fully, right? But they start demonstrating trust in themselves. And I think that is why this being the first video around this, I am like kind of freaking out to the point where I might read these 20 pages every day. Um, I have a life and young kids and all that sort of stuff, so it's unlikely, but I can see me reading Self-Reliance multiple times a week. Um, but just I get what he's saying with you exercise your self-trust and you get new powers, right? So like I said earlier in the video, I think it is when clients first come to me, and sorry I'm speaking so much about clients, like if you think I'm going to pitch you at the end of this or something, no. It's just I really like real world experiences. I can only speak through my lens versus try and be some amazing YouTuber or speak really abstract to open curiosity loops for you. The room is the room, right? Me is me. The transformations are the transformations. And so the cool thing about what I do is every transformation is different, right? Because it is completely dependent on the individual. What are their values? What principles do they believe in? Like all this kind of stuff. And we extract all that out so that theoretically they not only can trust themselves the most via feeling, but they have little tiny simple mechanisms using first principles thinking, like I also mentioned earlier in the video, like just based on truth, simply put, on how to continue to foster that self-trust so that that's what I think Emerson means by new powers, is that at first when I do that with clients is they're like reestablishing like kind of that fearlessness they had as a kid, right? Or when they started their business, to the point where they literally look at themselves and they think a couple of things. They're like, yeah, you know what? I am going to die at some point. I'm not really interested in having regrets when that happens. And maybe I just need to fucking go for it occasionally. Oh, yeah, Colby reminded me that I've created a bunch of evidence where I did go for it in the past. How is this any different? And then these things start snowballing, right? And so that's what I mean, where they find kind of their existing power by starting to trust themselves. And so I really spend a lot of time looking backwards for the utility of being like, this seems so fucking scary to you, right? This seems so scary to you. Okay, when you did this before, probably really fucking scary, right? Like, hey, when you married your life partner, probably pretty fucking scary. When you had your first kid, when you started this business, when you moved to another country, like, yeah, really scary shit, right? That's the amazing thing about it, is that you have already proven you can do it, right? And so that's the first part of like exercising self-trust, is like, oh yeah, I do have this power. I do have this ability to completely I don't want to say manipulate because it's kind of a negative word, but like shift my world into the direction I am seeking, even if I don't fully know where that ends, right? My life's goal, I call it the North Star, is to hit my potential by helping the most people hit theirs. The only promise I make is that you will trust yourself the most when you work with me, right? And so like they get to go back to the sandbox. They get to go back to that childlike wonder. They get to go back to that kind of like, oh yeah, what if I kind of jumped off this, 50-foot cliff into deep water? It's scary, but I don't think I'm gonna die. We'll handle that if it happens, like where I get seriously injured, all this kind of stuff. I don't need to go down that. So that's the first bit, right? And see, I like do this every day with clients. And so that's why this sentence is really resonating with me. I could go forever. My camera overheats because the cooling fan malfunctions, and I will probably just go until it starts saying, "Hey, I'm going to explode," and then I'll end this video. All right. So there's that, and then getting the new power, exercising self trust is new power, and so instead of that being like alchemy in my mind, where it's new power as in like it comes from nothing, I think it's just a natural compounding of kind of, again, that first principles thinking of just being like, well, what's the truth for me? Okay. If I do this thing, when I was younger, one of the most useful questions I asked myself was, if you do this, will you die? And the answer obviously was always no. And so I would do it. And now that question has transformed a little bit into, I never want to look back on my life and ask, where was my courage? And a lot of that is rooted in this study from the top 5 regrets of the dying by Bronnie Ware, which I think about all the time. And the number one regret of basically people who are on their deathbeds was overwhelmingly so, I wish I would have had the courage to be more true to myself than what others expected of me. And that comes full circle to this. It is basically saying, I think he even says in here, and I'll probably do a different video on it later, where he's like, imitation is suicide, right? The most common form of despair is not knowing yourself. And I spin all this into something I tell people, whether they're a client, whether they're brand new, like I kind of have this ability when I just grab coffee with strangers. When the stranger grabs coffee, I just, for some reason, have this ability to make them feel welcome within seconds, to where we are talking about pretty deep shit pretty quickly, right? And I would just say listening and asking like thought-provoking questions are some of my top skills. And so when someone comes into that sphere and they start telling me all these things, in almost every case, it comes to a point where I talk about self-trust, and I do it in this way. I will say, okay, person, first of all, thank you for trusting me with all that information. We just met, and that was incredibly brave and courageous of you to do that, right? Because you don't know me from anybody. Which is not entirely true, because, I produce videos like this and they feel like they know me, but we just haven't spoken, in person yet. And so I say all that because I mean it, because it is incredibly brave and courageous to pour your heart out to somebody and to basically say, I don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing, which, by the way, join the club. Nobody does. And there's such honor in actually admitting that and then moving forward anyway. Those are the people I care about versus the ones who need to look perfect all the time. It's like, I want to hug. If you need to look perfect, I just want to hug you. I want to be like, it's okay. It is okay for you to admit that you don't have a fucking clue. Okay. Anyways, they'll say that, they'll pour their heart out. I will thank them for their courage. And then it comes to a point where I will ask a question. I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. Who do you spend every second of every day with? And it's always the same reaction. They're always kind of like, well, me. And I'm like, exactly. Wouldn't you want that person to be the one you trust the most? And every time they're just like, or a version of that. And that is what I'm trying to explain here, is that, I give the example of the entrepreneur who's who's looking externally, or I gave the examples of like, hey, our business needs to grow. Let's hire this external thing or whatever. A better question would be, does our business need to grow? Right? What is I'm not I want your business to grow, but I want it to be based on the life attached to it, right? One of my favorite clients ever, back when I was doing more business coaching rather than what I do now, which, honestly, I'm still trying to find a label for it, but I'm kind of the same opinion, um, that when you start labeling something, you stop seeing it, right? And I got that from Alan Watts, from somebody else, Um, and I agree with it. It's just like once you start labeling something, and I also say with attachment, once you need something from it, you stop understanding it, right? And so I don't know exactly what it is, but all I know is that people trust themselves the most when they work with me. And so whether I come up with a label for it in the future or not, whatever. Obviously, I'm breaking every marketing rule right now by not labeling myself, by not branding myself, by all that sort of stuff. Forgive me. Um, I'm really not interested in putting myself into a place, and I don't think most people are either. But and I mention this even though it sounds tangential. I mention this because there will be another video if I keep doing these on self-reliance where I talk about that, because Emerson talks about it a ton of just, and I'm just going to give my version of it, of basically being like, when you, like you said, imitation is suicide. When you are just completely okay with following every little conformity, he's like, society isn't even a thing, right? It's basically made up. When you feel like you have to follow along, go along, whatever, right? You're already lost. You don't know who you are, right? You're worried about you're putting other people in front of the queue in front of you. You're putting their opinions in front of you. You're putting looking smart in front of you. Um, a great quote in here is like, being great means being misunderstood. Fucking loved that. Immediately put it on Instagram stories. But anyways, my favorite client ever in terms of story, and it's so basic, was when I was business coaching. This person hired me to help them scale their business. Now, I have acumen with that. I helped take a business from $0, bootstrapped it all the way to 2.8 million when I exited. Um, Learned so much, mostly of what I didn't want, right? But it was success on paper, and that's great. But because of that success on paper, I attracted people who were like, help me scale. I'm at 200K a year. I want to get to 500K a year, or whatever it is, right? And she was one of these people. And really quickly, from one-on-one sessions, I was basically like, tell me more about what you want, right? Dollars are great. What do you want those dollars to give you? As in, what life do you want attached to this success? Because making money is not hard. What life do you want attached to it? And long story short, was making about 20K a month. Again, this is when I got my start. Making about 20K a month, wanted to grow that number, but was currently working nights, holidays, and weekends. Had a staff that she was constantly double checking everybody. And so she didn't fully trust the staff. And quite frankly, her number one value, because we do a lot of values work, as in like core values, outcome values, um, personality values, experience values, all these sorts of things. That's really, really important, because that is kind of your makeup. And that's what I do with clients as well. And really quickly, she made it obvious that family was her number one value, far and away. Like, she was earning money to provide for her family, but moreover, she wanted to be with her family. And the business she was in was taking away from that. Everything she did was pulling away from more family time, when really she wanted to be mom number one, and then have a business that supported her being her number one job, being mom. And so I just asked a simple question. Again, first principles thinking, simple truth is, You're already working nights, holidays, and weekends on your current model. How does adding more help you? And she still to this day hasn't signed a new client. What she did was she made it more efficient. She cut more expenses. She halved her vendors and freelancers and staff. And now she works 4 days a week, 3 hours a day, and is a mom the majority of the time. And she has never made more profit. Right? So, like I said, my camera's overheating and I could go on this forever. But the point of this is, if you don't trust yourself, there is no way that you're going to feel fully convicted in the decision you make. There is no way that other people's trust is going to be able to supplement your own. There is no way that you are going to actually build something impressive and like the way that fruit tastes if you don't trust yourself first. And so those who exercise self-trust experience new powers. This is available to everyone. And if you're not sure how to exercise self-trust, if you feel completely lost with self-trust, I don't give people self-trust. I hold space so they can find it for themselves, right? There's a video on that. Talks all about conviction. There's a link down below. I will probably do more in this series. And thankfully, my camera will keep them, under an hour, because I could go forever because it's overheating. But thanks for being here. Do you like these rambly videos? Yes or no? They're very much me. And so if you stuck around this long, the video below will be useful to you. And until the next one, I'm going to turn this camera off before it explodes. So thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next one.